The biting wind of a Pennsylvania November has a way of finding every crack in a 1998 Ford Taurus. For 19-year-old Leo Caldwell, that car had been his bedroom, dining room, and sanctuary since aging out of the state foster system a year prior. Parked on the forgotten edge of Oak Haven, a Rust Belt town that had been slowly bleeding population since the steel mills closed, Leo survived on wages from washing dishes at a local diner and clearing out construction sites. He didn't have much, but he had a quiet, relentless determination. And he had a secret obsession: the Oak Haven Central Terminal. Constructed in 1924, the terminal was a sprawling, Gothic Revival monolith of brick, iron, and shattered glass. It had been abandoned for 3 decades, a decaying eyesore looming over the town's east side. To the city council, it was a dangerous liability. To the townspeople, it was a haunting reminder of better days. But to Leo, who had spent his life being shuffled from one temporary sterile group home to another, the massive, broken structure felt like a kindred spirit. It was battered, discarded, and entirely alone. The inciting incident of Oak Haven's greatest modern drama began on a dreary Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. The city, desperate to clear its books, had placed dozens of abandoned, tax-delinquent properties on the auction block. Leo sat in the back row, his hands stained with engine grease, clutching a manila envelope containing $1,450. It was his entire life savings, accumulated through 3 years of hoarding tips and side job cash. Property 402, BD Oak Haven Central Terminal, was announced. The starting bid was a mere $1,200. The city just wanted the property taxes paid and the legal liability transferred. In the front row sat Richard Sterling, a slick proxy bidder for a regional commercial developer. Sterling's firm had a backdoor deal with Oak Haven's mayor, Gregory Higgins. The plan was simple: let the city foreclose on the station, buy it for pennies, demolish it, and build a lucrative tax-subsidized distribution warehouse. $1,200, Sterling said, barely looking up from his phone. $1,250, a voice called out from the back. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked. Sterling frowned, looking over his shoulder at the scruffy teenager in the back row. $1,300, Sterling countered, irritated. $1,400. Leo fired back, his heart hammering against his ribs. Sterling scoffed. He had been authorized to spend up to $10,000, but his arrogance got the better of him. He assumed the kid was a prankster who didn't actually have the funds. Let him have it, Sterling muttered to his associate. The city will condemn it by the end of the month anyway. He'll default, and we'll get it for free. The gavel fell. For $1,400, Leo Caldwell, a homeless teenager, became the sole legal owner of a 40,000-square-foot ruined train station. When Mayor Gregory Higgins found out the terminal had been sold to a teenager living in a sedan, he was apoplectic. The warehouse deal was heavily reliant on an upcoming quarter, and Higgins was counting on the kickbacks. Within 48 hours of Leo receiving the deed, the harassment began. City inspectors descended on the terminal. They slapped a neon orange B-lead abatement order on the heavy oak doors. The notice was a death sentence. Leo had exactly 60 days to rectify 42 structural code violations, including securing the collapsed roof, removing all hazardous debris, and restoring basic electrical safety, or the property would be seized under eminent domain and demolished. It was an impossible task. It would take a professional crew months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to meet the demands. Leo didn't have a crew. He had a crowbar, a flashlight, and a severe sleep deficit. He moved his maker belongings into the old Ticketmaster's booth in the center of the Grand Concourse. It was the only room with 4 intact walls. By day, he worked his shifts at the diner. By night, fueled by cheap coffee and desperation, he hauled wheelbarrows of rotted timber, shattered glass, and rusted iron out of the station. He worked until his hands bled, wrapping them in electrical tape to keep going. The town watched. At first, they thought he was crazy, but as weeks passed, the sheer agonizing effort of the solitary figure hauling debris in the freezing snow began to stir something in the community. The first to cross the line was Stella Jenkins, a retired eccentric high school history teacher with a penchant for local lore. Stella showed up on day 16 with a thermos of beef stew and a stack of yellowed blueprints. "If you're going to fight City Hall, boy, you need to know the battlefield," she told him, unrolling the 1920s architectural schematics on a dusty crate. Stella became Leo's unpaid foreman and legal researcher. She scoured the city archives to find loopholes in the building codes, helping Leo prioritize the repairs that would satisfy the bare minimum of the abatement order. But more importantly, she brought him food, and for the first time in his life, Leo had someone checking in on him. By day 40, the physical toll was catching up to Leo. He had lost 10 pounds he couldn't afford to lose, and a winter storm had ripped away a massive tarp he had painstakingly rigged over the collapsed roof. He was sitting on the floor of the main concourse, exhausted, weeping in the dark. He struck the ground in frustration with a pry bar. Instead of the dull thud of cracked, dirty concrete, the metal struck with a sharp, hollow clank. Leo wiped his eyes, shining his flashlight on the spot. The concrete was flaking away. He chipped at it again. A piece of gray sludge broke off, revealing a flash of vibrant cobalt blue beneath. Frowning, he grabbed a wire brush and a bottle of water, scrubbing furiously at the floor. What the city and everyone else had assumed was a cheap, cracked concrete floor laid in the 1960s was actually a thick layer of industrial poured resin. Beneath it lay an immaculate, jaw-dropping artisan mosaic. Over the next 3 days, abandoning the structural repairs, Leo and Stella used heat guns and chemical solvents to carefully peel back the resin. The true floor of the Oak Haven Central Terminal was revealed. Hundreds of thousands of tiny hand-painted Italian tiles, depicting a sweeping mural of the American Industrial Revolution. It was a lost masterpiece of 1920s craftsmanship, intentionally covered up and hidden during the paranoid height of World War II, to prevent the reflective tiles from serving as a landmark for potential bombers, and subsequently forgotten. Stella was breathless. "Leo, this isn't just a train station. This is a state heritage site." Stella contacted a former student who worked as a photojournalist for a major state newspaper in Philadelphia. The article dropped on day 52. Homeless teen discovers lost architectural masterpiece. Corrupt mayor threatens demolition. The story went viral. Images of the stunning mosaic floor, contrasted with the heartbreaking reality of a teenager living in a freezing ticket booth to save it, captivated the state. Donations poured into a legal defense fund set up by Stella. Historical societies began tying the mayor's office up in frantic litigation. Mayor Higgins panicked. If the State Historical Board granted the station protected status, the warehouse deal was dead, and the impending audit would likely expose his backdoor financial arrangements with Sterling's firm. He decided to force the issue. On day 59, 1 day before the deadline, under the guise of an emergency public safety hazard, Higgins ordered the city's demolition crew to tear down the east wall. It was a bleak Tuesday morning when the yellow bulldozers rolled down Elm Street, accompanied by Mayor Higgins and the local sheriff, Arthur Davis. But they couldn't get near the building. Standing shoulder to shoulder in the bitter cold were over 300 citizens of Oak Haven. Diner waitresses, mechanics, off-duty nurses, and high school students linked arms around the perimeter of the terminal. In the center, standing on the steps of the grand entrance, was Leo. "Disperse immediately," Higgins yelled into a bullhorn, his face flushed with rage. "This building is condemned. Sheriff, arrest them." Sheriff Davis, a man who had lived in Oak Haven his entire life and whose grandfather had worked the rail lines, looked at the crowd. He looked at Stella Jenkins, who had taught him American history in the 11th grade. He looked at Leo, trembling but resolute. Davis unclipped his radio, handed it to his deputy, and walked over to join the line, standing directly in front of Leo. "My officers are here to keep the peace, Gregory," Davis called out. "I don't see a riot. I see a peaceful assembly." Before Higgins could order the bulldozer operators to move forward anyway, a sleek, black town car pulled up to the curb. The crowd parted as a sharply dressed woman in her late 60s stepped out. It was Evelyn Sterling, the ruthless, formidable CEO of Sterling Holdings and the mother of Richard Sterling, the proxy bidder Leo had defeated at the auction. Evelyn marched directly up to Mayor Higgins. "Mayor," she said, her voice like ice, "my office has been receiving calls all morning from the governor. You assured my son this land was unencumbered. Instead, You're attempting to bulldoze a teenager and a historical artifact to build a warehouse I never explicitly authorized. She turned to Leo, her expression softening just a fraction. You've cost my firm a great deal of time, Mr. Coldwell. But I abhor bad PR, and I happen to love preservation architecture. My son is fired, and as of this morning, Sterling Holdings has purchased all outstanding tax liens on this property. We are offering you a joint venture grant to fully restore this terminal, with you retaining 51% ownership. The transformation of the Oakhaven Central Terminal took 2 years. Funded by the Sterling Grant and protected by its new status as a state landmark, the building was meticulously brought back to life. The shattered skylights were replaced, the grand iron trusses sandblasted and painted, and the mosaic floor polished to a brilliant shine. It reopened not as a train station, but as the Oakhaven Terminal Market, a sprawling indoor hub featuring local food vendors, artisan stalls, a community theater, and a small museum run by Stella Jenkins. It breathed life back into the dying town, creating hundreds of jobs and turning Oakhaven into a weekend tourist destination. On the night of the grand opening, the terminal was alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Mayor Higgins was gone, having resigned in disgrace following a state investigation. Leo, now 21, stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the thriving community he had helped build. Stella walked up beside him, handing him a cup of cider. "You did it, kid. You saved the town. I just wanted to fix the roof," Leo smiled softly. "You've never told me," Stella said, her voice gentle. "Out of all the abandoned places in the world, why did you buy this one? Why did you risk freezing to death for it?" Leo fell silent. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, cracked, laminated Polaroid photograph. He handed it to Stella. The photo was dated 2006. It showed a beautiful, tired-looking young woman standing in front of the terminal's grand brass clock tower. She was holding a toddler in her arms. Both of them were smiling. "That's my mother," Leo said quietly. "She took that photo the day before she surrendered me to the state. She couldn't afford to keep me, and she was sick. But she left this picture tucked into my blanket." He looked up at the massive brass clock ticking away at the end of the concourse. On the back of the photo, she wrote, "No matter where you go, Leo, remember we were happy here. Meet me under the Oakhaven clock." Leo swallowed hard, his eyes shining. "I waited in the foster system for 15 years. She died when I was 12, but nobody told me until I aged out. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a home. So I bought the clock." Stella wiped a tear from her cheek and pulled the young man into a tight embrace. Down below, the music swelled, echoing off the beautiful, unbroken glass ceiling. Leo Caldwell wasn't homeless anymore. He had finally built himself a home, and in doing so, he had saved a town that desperately needed one.